everyone. My goodness, it's been a long time since I've said that. I have Dina Griffin here. I'm Tenille Hoogland, and this is not part of a summit. This is a relaunch of many of the interviews that I've had, and also bringing in new ones. And I'm thrilled to welcome Dina because Dina and I have had two incredible conversations in the past. So, and Dina, I'm just going to introduce you, and then we're just going to dig in, right? So, Dina is Dina Griffin is a sports dietitian, registered dietitian, and chief fueling officer. How much do you love that? For the Nutrition Mechanic, and it's a nutrition coaching company based out of Boulder, Colorado. I know personally how successful she is because one of my dear athletes, Melissa, worked with Dina one-to-one and just came out with just so many new tools and ways and approaches to think about how she could change her nutrition in perimenopause to just, really thrive. And her dialing in and the attention and accountability was just top notch. So thank you, Dina. So that's the firsthand account, first of all, and how coaches and registered dietitians can work together so beautifully and seamlessly as well. So, Dina, we first talked like at the beginning. It feels like I was thinking, I'm like, well, I can't say it was the beginning of the launch of the perimenopause movement, but it almost feels like it was because it was way back in 2021, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a number of years ago. And then we got to do it again. And that first conversation we had was really like, I listened to it. I'm like, man, this stuff is awesome. It was about protein, and protein has just taken a massive just a resurgence, and everybody wants to talk about protein. And now you can go to McDonald's and like get protein, like everywhere has protein. Like it's just like it's like protein. And I just kind of laugh because when we think about it, sometimes we forget some of the basics, and sometimes we forget some of the really just critical information. And that interview that you did really just laid it out for people in a way that I was like, okay, if you want just solid, straight information about protein without getting lost, go to that interview. So that's my first thing. Do you have any updates or things that you've learned about protein? I mean, I'm sure you have. Um, knowing you like that, but you're just like, you know what, this is an avenue that I if I had to say one thing about this incredible macronutrient that you want people to just be reminded of on that.
Thank you, Tenille. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I think about our history talking on protein, it's like some of these core tenets, if you will, still remain. And it's such a reliable constant when we talk about daily nutrition or how important it is, especially as we age, as active women, athletic women. I think update wise is just realizing that there is still a range for what optimal protein intake is for each of us. I mean, I think we talked on that before, but depending on, who you're listening to or where you get your information, for some of us, we might hear it has to be this super high amount, nonstop, no question. And I think what I've seen, especially with some of my vegetarian or vegan athletes, is, that reality isn't workable for all of us. There are things like protein quality that we really have to look at, and that distribution, the timing thing. So I don't know that any of those are brand new concepts or updates. It's more, I think, assuring those that are listening and who are working on their protein intake or starting to look at it, that
Mhm.
there's still some flexibility within that we apply to the individual. And I think that gets lost sometimes with the messaging.
I think too. I think because we become so regimented and almost dogmatic about like it's got to be this way, and we just kind of really hone in on that. And I appreciate that because even before we came on live here, um, you know, it's so individual, and you're going into a whole new way of thinking as you research and look into genomics and genetics, and how the body probably, I have no idea really because I haven't researched that at all, but I'm just thinking, well, yeah, how one person responds is going to be very different than another. And if I just look at my sister and I, my sister, she is not a protein person at all.
Mhm.
And I really am. Like,
Yeah.
our breakfasts have to be very different. And it's just like, what is that about? Like, why?
Yeah.
Same genetic line, same parents. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a prime example. Like you would think, well, you should be about the same with siblings or family, parent to offspring, but there are so many genetic variants that affect so many aspects of how we uh, may need to nourish ourselves, especially as we age or have health issues or things that can get missed when, for example, we only look at one macro or we only look at numbers and we're not
That's
talking
right.
about the quality of that protein.
That's right.
So certainly gets into the nuance and the weeds, but
Yeah.
it's an
Which
example.
we actually go into, we talk about bioavailability. Of course we do. Like, we talk
Yeah.
about the BCAAs, and like, that's a fascinating thing. It's like, you really just gave such a great example. So go back to that, because the interview that we did with both you and Bob Siebohar was really then diving into metabolic health, metabolic flexibility, metabolic efficiency point. Now, there's a lot of words that people aren't going to really know a lot about, but what is interesting is this idea of metabolism. And I think what I've been following, and the people that I follow in podcasts and social media, it seems to be like that now is starting to rise to the top. So we kind of were we were way at the beginning on the protein, and now we were way at the beginning on metabolic health and flexibility and talking about those things. And now that's, a couple of years later again, because it was, it's like they're talking about it in with a lot more there's a lot more noise around it and trying to get straight. So then I encourage people to really come into understanding this idea of what is metabolic flexibility. How do we understand, again, using our macronutrients of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, how those balance out? And Bob and Dina together really had a complementary discussion about how do we in perimenopause and beyond start to, one of the major points that you were putting forward was, how do we look under the hood? What
Mhm.
is the data that is going to enable us to start to put together our understanding of how we're using different macronutrients of protein, carbohydrates, and fats? And so that's where we talked about, actually, one of the things that changed, really impacted me in that interview, was thinking about the methodology that is in metabolic efficiency training. And Bob was just like, well, we don't necessarily go to calories. We don't necessarily look at the amount. That's not necessarily where we want to start. We want to, there's a lot of other things that we're going to start with. And I'm like, okay, I really want to make sure that when I am speaking to my athletes more generally, that I have as many starting points as possible to meet my athletes where they're at. And so I did the metabolic efficiency training with Bob, and following in those footsteps, because it was a very impactful conversation. So I guess, where are you at? And then what we're going to do in this conversation is actually tie these two together, and I have a really specific question on that. But when we think about that idea of metabolic efficiency point and metabolic flexibility, where did some of your thinking right now, and how you're just like, Tenille, it's still the critical thing? Or tell me what your thinking is on that now, and if anything's evolved, or if, I mean, yeah, like, where has your experience a number of years later led you?
Yeah, honestly, I feel and have seen this principle and the strategies associated with supporting metabolic efficiency and flexibility to be still quite relevant. Um, I mean, it's one of many tools to to look at, but I still find it extremely valuable with almost all clients that I work with in the, athletic scope. Certainly for those who are more maybe not as athletic, but trying to honor health and that like long health span, lifespan, keeping in mind, like, what do I want to, be like from a health perspective when I'm 80 or 90? And so this principle of supporting metabolic efficiency and how our body uses fuel sources through nutrition strategies, and that there's the training and there's, some other things there, but it's still quite pertinent to Neil. So I would say, like, okay, there's no change here in
That's
its
right.
relevance. In fact, I see it as something that, our perimenopause athletes and our women athletes in the postmenopause phase, like it is something to include in an assessment. So all of that just to say the update is it's still important.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I would say there are things that I've learned to also bring into the picture when we're looking at data or when we're looking at or just hearing what the person is experiencing. There are things to listen for or things that may need to be examined further. So I would say my other point here is just that I don't see this as the be all end all, and that's all that we do with nutrition is try to support metabolic efficiency. It's still a good foundation in the work I do, but there's other complementary pieces.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I think if this didn't, for those that are listening, if I didn't really make sense when we talk about like, well, what is about metabolic efficiency? Like, what are you guys actually talking about? This is part of it is that I want you to go back to that, listening to that interview, because you're going to hear this next question and then it'll make even the depth of your understanding will be even greater. And I love it that you say this is the idea of expanding and learning more and serving a population is that in the space of perimenopause and in menopause, there's so much more conversation than where we began. And there's so many more people, I believe, speaking and seeing the whole human in a different way. Like I was listening to a phenomenal interview on the thyroid. I can't remember. It was likely Peter Attia, and because that I don't really miss any of his, and it was fascinating because the expert on it was just really sharing so much of how similar some of the when the thyroid isn't like working in the way it would normally does, then how much they mimic the symptoms of perimenopause.
Mhm.
And like it's very difficult to start managing if the perimenopause symptoms aren't managed, or you're really suffering from the symptoms of perimenopause. It'll be very difficult to figure out how to treat, how to address the thyroid. So her suggestion in this, and I'm just giving an example of like how we need to bring in so many different things. And this is where when you really focus, so for me, I'm a more generalist. I specifically look at how do I train my athletes in the best possible way, but I need to know about all these other things so that when somebody needs support, that I have the general knowledge to say, okay, we've got these symptoms, you need to go to your OBGYN and get support with hormone potentialities and like potentially and address this issue. And we may need to dive into a nutritional strategy to help on this, because now you're dealing with Hashimoto's and you have all these other issues that might be coming up, and go to your registered dietitian that is going to be critically looking into and understanding these other pieces. I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but like this is where I think that you are constantly being like, okay, my lens is training, your lens is nutrition. How do we come together?
Yeah. And that, Tenille, I mean, that is a great example of the importance of like the team and for the person listening, like if you are working with you, Tenille, or any other practitioner, is just
Mm-hmm.
being able to vocalize what it is that is being noticed. I think beyond data or beyond metrics we might have with our Oura ring or whatever, whoop,
Yes.
all the things. And then for us as practitioners at, having our specialties is facilitating that dialogue. Because a lot of times there is a clue there if the person is, not adapting to something or hitting some sort of struggle point or bottleneck, that communication to have open and then be able to explore that. Because I think as women, sometimes we're just like, oh, this is just how it is, and I'm gonna
Oh,
just have to deal with it. And honestly, I think now more than ever, finding our voice to have that courage to say like this isn't okay. I shouldn't have to deal with these terrible perimenopause symptoms or whatever the case is.
yeah.
So um, that
Addressing
just
it
a
in that way.
comment.
So now I want to bring both this. I'm going to give you an example of something that I continuously hear. So after our protein discussion, all right, I'm going to give you a fictitious athlete that I think many will identify with. Um, okay, got my protein up. I'm not at the 2.0, but I'm pretty consistently at 1.6. 1.6 grams per kilogram. Like I'm doing really, really well. It's like, oh my goodness. And I'm training in the polarized way now. I'm not going too hard all the time. I'm doing easy when it's easy. Doing my intensity. And when I'm doing intensity, I'm lifting as much as I can. I'm lifting safely. Okay. I'm optimal. I'm timing it. I'm like making sure I'm fueling before I do my workouts. Okay. So like this model of health. But Tenille, I I can't, I'm at a plateau. I initially lost a little bit of weight, and some of this, like, and we're not talking, and this is I'll speak specifically. We're talking about an athlete that wants to feel good in their body again and is carrying excess weight that doesn't want to come off. They may be at risk of diabetes. They are pre-diabetic, and they might, because their metabolism isn't, it's come to a plateau. They came down a little bit, but now it's at this plateau, and they're like, is this where I'm supposed to sit now?
Mm.
And so is this my healthy weight stabilized now, or am I, how do I am I metabolically efficient still, or do I need to think about this, or am I too low in my energy availability and now my metabolism has tanked again and I have to reevaluate whether I need to bump it up? And I guess where I want to ask you to kind of go is, how do we shake things up if we thought that we were getting the right recipe?
Ooh, good one, Tennille.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
like kind of like a nutritional thing. I was like, that was
I
pretty
love
good.
that. We need a new cookbook.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
um, yes. Well, I would want to clarify like how long has this plateau been happening and how are we gauging that plateau?
Mm-hmm.
Because just as with training, we don't always see this like, woo, we're going exponentially up in speed or pace or power. And we have to have these soak in periods of time, or, it's just different for each person how rapid that progress is, or what our starting point is, and where we're headed. The rate is different. So just that's kind of like a reframe, like plateaus aren't always bad, it's still
Right.
can
Yep.
be a sign that the body is maybe adapting and needs some hold time there.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of along the lines of an assessment and expectations, maybe. But let's say we've, been monitoring and this has been some time,
Yeah.
we're 3, 4 months and things are kind of
Right.
holding
Yep.
steady. This is where I would say, I mean, nutritionally, uh, doing some adjustments, and we don't always have to do the calories and the macro hardcore quantitative, but there can be times where we do need to see, well, you think you've been fueling well and eating well, but let's check. Check the
Mhm.
numbers for me to do that or for the person to do that themselves, just because we can get into those habits where, well, yeah, I've been eating the same way, and
Mhm.
perhaps we're just missing out either on overall calories, or maybe there's something within that
Mhm.
has slipped a little. Um, I will say sometimes there is this refeeding kind of window where we want to give the body a few more calories. That could be 300 more calories. I don't want to say it is like a kickstart or a booster, but it can be, depending on what kind of training and all of that. Like we just need some more energy into the
Yeah.
body to move the needle. I mean,
And
that's great if we
I
can. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's just such an incredible concept for people to understand
Yeah,
that when we eat more, if we were potentially under fueling and or maybe even like we're even just talking to like 200 calories, we don't have to be talking a lot here, but
yeah,
just that little bit of under fuel, like digging in too deep. When we eat more, it can kickstart that without using Kickstarter, like it can
yeah,
bring up our body will say, this is my language. It's like, oh, I can I can use this. I can rev the engine. I can get something going here again. And so it actually brings up your metabolism because it's got more to burn off. And then all of a sudden, you've actually, by eating more, you've brought up your metabolism a little bit. And
yeah,
then you just kind of then may be able to change that even energy expenditure
yeah.
potentially again. It's just like that kind of shift potentially. I think that is so cool for people to understand and
Oh,
really hear.
and it's counter, right, to
It's
what we
totally
think
counter what
when
we
we're
think.
thinking about, oh, I just need to burn more calories or I gotta eat less calories. It's like, well, actually, let's stoke the fire a little more and we can still maintain that level of metabolic efficiency, fat burning. This is where it's add on. Then Tenille is looking at uh, nutrient, like the micronutrient side, because sometimes when we think about, and you've talked about this on with your other guests too, and you talk about this all the time, is just this inflammation that can
Mm,
occur when hormones are shifting, depending on our symptoms.
yeah.
Uh, this word inflammation, I think, gets so confusing because I still think of like, oh, I dinged my elbow on the door or like I smashed my
Yeah.
thumb, and we're talking about inflammation you can't really see. Sometimes you do feel it with joint pain or just, other irritating symptoms, but this change in even our gut microbiome or our immune activation response, like how are we and our bodies hanging on and operating fully, systems are 100%. There's a lot happening day to day, minute to minute. But sometimes with that, like we'll call it weight stabilizing or this plateau where there still is opportunity that we've identified to change body composition, looking at what we're eating. We might keep carb protein ratios the same, macro, all that kind of same, but looking at what's in those foods to really provide more of it's like the supporting
Right.
nutrients that kick up the fire a little bit more or kick down inflammation or resolve inflammation that's happening. And that's kind of like, what? I don't know tell me what to eat. What does that mean?
That's right.
And a lot of times we can translate that to, it's like, well, back to our basics of colorful fruits and veg and
Yeah.
real potent information in food that feed these pathways of instead of storing excess fat, we're actually mobilizing. And that doesn't happen on its own. We have to support it through the quality of the food.
Yeah. Fascinating. And I think that one thing that you were saying a bit earlier, is thinking about, you were talking about really listening to the individual. And
Mm,
I think that one of the fascinating things as we go into our little AI world of, like a lot of people are utilizing ChatGPT to get
mm,
advice and that's really great. But, and I
yes.
think where it's interesting is that, what we prompt an AI to do is based on what we know.
Mm,
And when we think about working with somebody or being able to investigate all those little pieces that you've just talked about, they're going to, the prompts that you come up with, Dina, are coming from such a foundation of like, okay, I've heard you. What I want to know is, and that person might say, what, why do I need to tell you about that? Like, tell me about that. Like, it's trying to figure out what are those prompts that are actually the relevant information that is going to help us get to the solution. And I think that if people are trying to, get creative or understanding, if we need help to get the right prompts. And yes, chat gpt might have a lot of answers, and I love my chat gpt, and we might not know the question to actually ask. And
yes.
that's where a really, inquisitive and patient and curiosity forward human like Dina
I love that.
and myself, like is gonna be like, okay,
Yeah.
it's something that we're gonna help bring into an awareness because
Mhm.
you don't quite have it there. And I think that you're pointing to so a number of things in this very short, and we said we were going to try to keep it 20 minutes. We're already at 30 because we could talk all day. But anyway, but I think where we're coming to is, and I'm going to leave you with the last word, but is like when we're learning about things like protein at the beginning and metabolic efficiency and flexibility and metabolic health and how to manage these things. And you have said so many times, it really depends on the individual. It really depends on where they're at. It really depends on many different things. And that you also just managed to say, really understand what your expectations are. Be aware of what those expectations of what is a plateau, what is actually normal to happen before we want to say, yeah, but I want to keep going down, a pound a week or whatever you decided that was going to be your threshold of okayness in the and goal oriented achievement. And so you're bringing, and you as a again, I love this, my like curiosity forward person is going to say, okay, well, how does genomics and genetics come into this? And let's keep on diving in. So what, anything else that you want to kind of wrap up or say and make sure that people are hearing before they go and listen to the other two interviews that we've done together?
Well, I think I would add to Neil just this realization that yeah, depending on what you're pursuing, let's say in this context of body change or body composition and getting to where you want to be. I mean, this, you mentioned the word patience too. I mean, we having patience as coaches and practitioners, but as you, the person, it can take some time to uncover what it is your body needs or what it's missing. Uh, and not that we each want to be a guinea pig and go through years and years of testing and diagnostics, but I think being open to knowing that there maybe is more than just the things that we start with. Those are great places that we've got to master. And then because we're all beautiful snowflakes, there might be these couple other areas that we've got to dive into further. And that can be a beautiful thing if you are receptive to that and bring you other benefits beyond just maybe body composition change. So I think just with that, Tennille, is like for all of us to be continually better at listening to what it is we're feeling and not forcing things that don't feel well. Some of that intuitive sense that can get lost because
Mhm.
we're on the, so driven anyway and on this mission to achieve the goal, that we forget to pay attention to how we're feeling in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was just thinking, I'm like, I want to like start an add 6 months movement because it seems like whenever we have a goal, we really should just automatically add 6 months
Yeah,
to even like a starting point. And because it is that it
yeah,
takes at least, I remember when I was working in government, somebody said to me, yeah, you don't really, become really useful in your job until you've been there for, I think it was 10 months. I have no idea. And where, whatever, that it didn't even really matter. But it just, the point is that it takes us a long time to learn something and
mhm,
really internalize something and then to know what works and what doesn't work. And
yeah,
we want change immediately, and sometimes the best and the biggest changes come through time. And that's what you're saying. And I really appreciate
yeah,
that. Yeah. And
yes.
it's probably not what people want to hear either. But, when have we ever just gone the easy way, Dina?
I know.
Yeah.
That is a truth, but yeah,
Yeah.
trying to hang in there in the process
Yeah.
and trust that there is a process, I think
Mhm.
is helpful and can get us where we ultimately are accepting and achieving all of the things together. But it's definitely a harmonious set of variables that have to come
Yeah,
together.
totally. Well, so, this is also to just really share if these things come through community and through working and being and surrounding yourself with really great people. So, for those of you that really want to delve deeply into a nutritional journey, Dina is a wonderful person and her team behind her and with her. So, go and check out the Nutrition Mechanic. And if you are looking for that whole athlete approach to coaching, then definitely look to both myself and to Jen, who I am working with very closely here. And we can't thank you enough for being on this journey with us. So thank you. Thank you, Dina, for joining me.
Thank you, Tenille.